You just got a raise. Maybe it's not huge, but it's something. An extra 20, 30, or even 50% more than you were making before. And your first thought is probably something like, finally, I can breathe a little. Maybe start saving. Maybe stop living paycheck to paycheck. So you upgrade your apartment, you start eating out more often, you buy better groceries, you subscribe to a few more streaming services, you get the nicer coffee instead of the instant stuff, and suddenly, after a few months of this new income, you realize you're still broke. In fact, you might even be more broke than you were before you got the raise. And that's not some economic anomaly or a personal failing. That's lifestyle creep. And it's one of the most common and most invisible financial traps in the modern economy. Lifestyle creep is when your expenses rise at the same pace or faster than your income, meaning that no matter how much you earn, you never actually get ahead. You just find new things to spend money on. It sounds simple, almost obvious when you say it out loud, but the effects are genuinely devastating when you compound them across decades of working life. People working today could be making 2, 3, or even 10 times what their parents made at the same age, and yet they're not any closer to financial independence. In fact, many are worse off. The difference isn't that they're bad with money or that they're irresponsible spenders. It's that their lives have gotten more expensive in ways they often don't even notice happening. The math on this is brutal, actually. Let's say you're making $50,000 a year and you're living on every penny of it. Your housing, your food, your transportation, everything adds up to exactly what you earn. Then you get promoted and you're now making $75,000. That's an increase of 50%. A huge win, right? In theory, you just increased your discretionary spending power by $25,000 a year. But that's not what actually happens in most people's lives. What happens instead is your apartment starts feeling too small, so you move to a nicer place that costs $300 more per month. Your car is getting older, so you upgrade to something newer with a car payment. You start buying better brands at the grocery store. You join a gym, you travel more, you upgrade your phone, you buy better quality clothing. And before you know it, that $75,000 salary is being spent just as completely as your $50,000 one was. You're not actually 50% richer. You're just spending 50% more. And the worst part is that this cycle repeats every time you get a raise or a new job. You make more, your costs go up, and you're stuck on the same treadmill, just running faster. This isn't happening by accident either. There are actually some pretty powerful forces pushing lifestyle creep to happen, and a lot of them are pretty deliberate. When you make more money, the world around you changes. Your social circle might shift. Your co-workers at a higher-paying job might be wearing better clothes, driving nicer cars, living in better neighborhoods. There's a psychological pull to match that standard, to fit in, to not feel left behind. It's not really about being vain or shallow. It's just about feeling like you belong. And then there's the marketing. The entire advertising industry is built on the premise that you need more stuff, that your current life is insufficient, that you need to upgrade. When you're making $50,000, advertisements are targeting you with certain products and services. But when you're making $75,000, suddenly you're being marketed to entirely different products. Luxury products, premium services, experiences that used to feel out of reach. Credit card companies are offering you higher limits. Banks are suggesting investment products. Real estate agents are telling you about neighborhoods you could now afford. And because you've just gotten this pay increase, because you do now have a little more breathing room, it feels reasonable to indulge. It feels like you've earned it. The psychology of lifestyle creep is actually pretty interesting. Economists call it hedonic adaptation, the idea that humans very quickly get used to their circumstances and return to a baseline level of happiness. You get a raise and you're excited about it for a few weeks, but then that baseline resets. The new salary becomes normal, and you start wanting more again. So the things that felt like luxuries a few months ago now feel essential. The nice apartment becomes the baseline. The expensive coffee becomes normal. The car payment becomes expected. This is why lottery winners often end up broke a few years after winning, and why celebrities who make millions can still find themselves in financial trouble. They're not necessarily bad with money in some fundamental way. It's just that their expenses have expanded to match their income, and sometimes even exceed it. The hedonic treadmill keeps spinning, and the thing about this treadmill is that it accelerates as you go. The jump from 50 to 75,000 feels significant, but the jump from 150 to 200 doesn't feel that much bigger, even though it's the same absolute increase. So the percentage of your raise that goes to lifestyle tends to increase over time. Your first raise, you might save half. Your second, you might save a quarter. By your fifth or sixth raise, you're saving almost nothing because your lifestyle is already locked in at such a high level. But here's what's really dangerous about lifestyle creep. It's invisible. You don't see it happening in real time. You're not sitting there consciously deciding to become poor again. The decisions all seem reasonable individually. Of course you should move to a nicer apartment. You can afford it now. Of course you should have a nicer car. Everyone at your job drives something decent. Of course you should go on vacation. You deserve a break. But these individual decisions add up. And by the time you realize what's happened, you're locked into a higher cost of living. And now, you can't go back. You can't downgrade your apartment without feeling like you failed. You can't trade in your car for something cheaper without feeling embarrassed. Your entire lifestyle has become your identity, and you're trapped defending it. The generational impact of this is particularly interesting. Your parents might have bought a house when they were younger, built equity over time, maybe paid it off eventually. But you got a good job right out of school, and instead of aggressively saving or paying down a mortgage, you spent that money on experiences, on lifestyle, on keeping up with your peers. 30 years later, your parents have a house and significant assets. You have a really nice apartment and a lot of stuff, but no wealth. And then, when you finally do decide to buckle down and save, you're 35 or 40, and you're competing with people who've had 15 years of compounding on their investments. The damage is already done. The early years of earning are absolutely critical for building wealth, not because you're making more than you will later, but because time and compounding are your best friends. And if those years are consumed by lifestyle creep, you're essentially stealing from your future self. Think about it this way. If you saved just $300 a month from the age of 22 to 32 and then never invested another penny, and that money returned 10% annually by the time you retired at 65, that would be worth over $300,000. But if you waited until 32 to start saving, thinking you'd save more later, you'd need to save almost $800 a month to catch up. The math is absolutely brutal. And it's all because of compound interest and the time value of money. There's also something particularly cruel about how lifestyle creep interacts with inflation. Even if you manage to resist the urge to spend more, your costs are going up anyway. Housing prices rise, food costs more, utilities increase, and then you get a raise that's supposed to keep pace with inflation. And people think that's good news. But a cost of living raise is not actually raising your living standards, it's just keeping them the same. And yet, people spend it anyway, upgrade anyway, and suddenly they're spending their raise on slightly more expensive versions of the same things they were buying before. So they feel richer, but they're actually just treading water. The solution to lifestyle creep is not to never upgrade your life or to live like a pauper even when you can afford better. It's to be intentional about where that extra money goes. When you get a raise, the first instinct should not be to increase your spending. It should be to increase your savings. If you make $50,000 and you get a 30% raise to $65,000, a reasonable approach is to allocate half of that increase to savings and half to lifestyle improvements. So you save an extra $75 a week and you spend an extra $75 a week. That way, you're actually getting ahead financially while also enjoying the benefits of making more money. It's not as satisfying as upgrading everything immediately, but it's infinitely more effective. The key is that your increases in spending should be intentional and limited, not automatic and unlimited. When you get a raise, sit down and decide exactly how much extra you're going to spend. Make it a rule. Maybe it's 30% of the raise. Maybe it's 50% if you're already doing well financially. But make a decision and stick to it. The rest goes into savings, into investments, into building actual wealth. And if you change jobs, if you get a windfall, if you have any change in income, apply the same principle. Portion of it goes to lifestyle and the rest goes to security. Because that's ultimately what wealth is about. It's about having options. It's about not being terrified when your car breaks down or when you lose your job. It's about being able to retire someday without worrying constantly about money. It's about building something that lasts, not just buying things that make you feel better temporarily. Lifestyle creep is insidious because it feels harmless. Every individual spending decision seems justified. But collectively, over years and decades, it adds up to a complete derailment of financial goals. You end up working longer than you need to, retiring later than you could have, always feeling like you should be able to afford more, but somehow never managing it. And the worst part is that it becomes harder to break as time goes on. Because now your lifestyle is embedded. Your identity is wrapped up in where you live, what you drive, where you eat, how you spend your time. Breaking free from lifestyle creep after years of it is psychologically difficult, not just financially. So the best time to address it is now, at whatever income level you're at. If you've just graduated and got your first real job, spend it like you're still in school. Bank the difference. If you've just gotten a promotion, don't immediately upgrade your life to match. If you're thinking about switching jobs for more money, remember that more money doesn't mean a better life unless you use it intentionally. The invisible tax that lifestyle creep represents is paid in decades of working life that could have been spent on actual freedom, on actual security, on actual choice. And paying that tax year after year without even realizing what's happening is one of the most common mistakes in personal finance. The good news is that it's a problem you can actually control, unlike inflation or market crashes or job loss. It's completely within your power to make different choices about what you do with your raises and your increases in income. And if you do, if you can break the cycle and actually pocket some of that increased earning power as savings instead of lifestyle, the difference over a lifetime is absolutely staggering. Thanks for watching, mate. Bye.